And he saw, oh my God, this is selling my books. Like within the first 5 days, he was like, I've never sold so many books before I got on TikTok. He also uses YouTube and Instagram, and he has a Discord community. So it started to expand outward from his TikTok use. But as of today, every Friday, he does a TikTok live where he sells like a couple $1,000s worth of books.
Holy shit.
And he is not unusual. Like, he is but the tip of the iceberg. Hi, my name is Jane Friedman. I'm the author of The Business of Being a Writer, now in its second edition, and I run an industry newsletter for authors called The Bottom Line.
When did you first identify as a writer?
Probably when I saw my mom writing a children's novel at the kitchen table, which inspired me to take out a fresh notebook and start my own project. So that was when I was in 5th grade.
Amazing. Did she get that published?
She did not. She racked up dozens of rejections.
Oh.
But, you know, she was writing something that was not appropriate for the market at that time. It was an astrology-inspired middle grade children's novel, which maybe today it would sell, but not in the 1980s.
Famous. Yeah. What's your all-time favorite book?
I don't have one. It really depends on, like, if it's a writing and publishing book or a novel or a nonfiction. So I can't choose an all-time.
Give me just one you love.
The one I talk about most frequently in this sort of context is probably Status Anxiety by Alan de Botton. He's a UK author. He's not as well known in the United States. And so I'm constantly recommending his stuff. Really, any of his books will do, but I think Status Anxiety pertains a lot to the writing and publishing.
It's nonfiction?
Yes.
What is it about? Is it the prose? Is it the content? Is it?
You know, it's very emblematic of what this author is so good at, which is looking at how we live our modern lives in a way that's healthier and happier through self-examination.
Nice. What's your dream writing routine?
To have a day full of no appointments or responsibilities on the calendar where I can just think about the writing and not have to take a break or prepare for something else.
Totally. That's why I'm recording like a stupid amount of podcast interviews in these 2 weeks, but it's so that I can protect my writing time exactly like that. What's your real writing routine?
The real routine is usually cramming the writing into like 1 hour blocks. I tend to do it first thing in the day before I open email or do anything that would get me distracted or upset or anxious about other things going in my work life.
What's one piece of writing that makes you jealous you didn't write it?
I'll just go back to Alan de Botton. Anything that he writes is something I wish I had thought of first on the nonfiction side. I just find like he writes things that you feel like that is absolutely true, but why didn't I think to say it that way?
I'm really excited to dive into our publishing chat. I feel like I've known you for a long, like I've known of you as like a publishing guru for kind of the whole time that I have been writing. So give us the Cliff's Notes of your publishing journey and kind of how you like carved out this niche for yourself.
I started working in publishing while I was still in college. I interned for a couple places and then ended up working full-time for a commercial publisher in Cincinnati, which is where I live now. And I spent 12 years there working primarily in nonfiction publishing, a variety of imprints. I left that company after 12 years to take a teaching job at the University of Cincinnati. I stayed there a couple years, and then I went back into publishing at a literary journal at the University of Virginia. And then I left that job after a couple years and went full-time freelance in 2014. So since then, I have been primarily focused on doing my own writing and publishing work and doing online education for writers, which a lot of that directly grows out of the traditional publishing experiences that I had.
I have the latest, The Business of Being a Writer, and this was previously published. Walk us through your oeuvre. Is that how you say it?
Yeah. I mean, that book is if you're looking for something in book form, that is like kind of the beginning and the end at this moment in time of what I have. I like dumped everything I know into that very thick book. And I would say, though, when I think about my body of work, it's really the newsletters that I send more so than the stuff that's more traditional.
So the original came out in 2019. Is that right?
2018 was the first edition. And since I'm working with a university press on that particular project, that means it was really written about 3 years prior.
Okay.
So that was one of the reasons it started to become, I wouldn't say urgent, but it's like I didn't want to recommend the book because so much of it had gone out of date. And so that second edition just came out this year.
Yeah, that's such a good resource. Also, Courtney Mom's before and after the book deal. Yeah. But so much has changed. I mean, it really was ripe for an update because, oh my God, like the landscape is totally different. And I would love to unpack some of those trends with you. Some of the things that I'm thinking about are like Substack, the way that self-publishing used to be a dirty word. And now we've got like big fives, like scouting for successful self-published authors, kind of trying to like ride their coattails, which is a funny reversal. We've got AI entering the chat. And I just read something that you wrote or interview that you did about hybrid presses, which I feel like are becoming more prominent. So you can kind of take your pick and we'll dive in.
Well, you know, one of the things that badly needed updating in that book was a look at the self-publishing side, a look at what hybrid publishing is or thinks it is, because it's a very kind of complicated area. And also looking at the social media and newsletter space and how it's evolved over the last decade, because when that first edition came out, Substack didn't exist. I think if I had to like put an umbrella over like a lot of these changes, I think the rise of the creator economy is central to a lot of the change. The rise of TikTok, the rise of Substack, YouTube, just the way that people make money and make a living as a writer these days is so rarely about, oh, let me publish my book and launch my career. Often the book is, you know, the exclamation point at the end of that sentence rather than the beginning of the sentence. So what I'm seeing today is just so much entrepreneurship and creator-oriented activity happening in the self-publishing market especially. But I'm also seeing that the traditionally published authors who succeed, they are not looking to their publishers to solve the marketing and promotion challenge. You know, they're already thinking about, okay, how am I going to build a readership foundation for myself that is going to outlast any publishing or agent relationship I might have?
Totally. And I was actually just thinking recently about like kind of, you know, there's lots of complaints about gatekeepers and stuff. I feel like before that was like a huge part of the conversation. And now it's kind of like the privilege is really having the like innate entrepreneurship to like be able to juggle those other things. Can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah. So this is something that concerns me for like, let's say more traditional authors in particular, the people who are approaching this as art, as literature with a capital L. You know, they're not their skill set may or may not relate to what we would call platform building activities or activities that are about direct reader engagement. But as time goes on, this is becoming more and more fundamental to having a career, particularly a career that pays. The thing that also makes this so complicated to talk about, in my mind, is that the companies that or the services or the platforms that you're using to help build this career, they're probably companies you don't like, run by billionaires you don't admire and that you want nothing to do with. So obviously, you know, I'm talking about Amazon and Google and, you know, TikTok and all of these services that have come under increased scrutiny, especially with AI now kind of getting people quite upset about what's happening there, well, with the copyright infringement lawsuits. So my message in that book and my message over the last, 20 years has been the business doesn't have to be antithetical to the creative part of the business. You know, it's not like you're supposed to change personalities like Jekyll and Hyde once it's time to market and promote. The way that you market and promote, the framing should come out of your creative practice. It should align with your values. It's not supposed to be this dirty thing that is totally divorced from the intention you went into writing with. That said, you know, right now in particular, I'm thinking of TikTok because I've been interviewing many authors who are using video, TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube. They're using video. And I don't, personally speaking, I'm not attracted to doing video content. But when you see so many success stories, like I'm seeing authors who started out within the last 5 or 6 years, you know, I don't think it's overstating it to say 75% of the time these are people who have built their careers in some sort of video platform. So where does that leave someone starting off today? It's like, I don't want to tell people, well, you got to learn how to be on camera. There's Substack. I guess you can try that, you know? So it's just, sometimes I feel like having been established now in my own career for, 25 to 30 years, I don't have some of the same early career, emerging career concerns that maybe a reader of my book would have. But I absolutely feel the pressures of, if I am not doing this thing that now reaches readers, I will become irrelevant. I will disappear into the ether. You know, I still feel the same pressures that anyone feels. And I don't have a solution to this. It's just, it's kind of, this is the environment we're now in.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because you it's like, did you know this was coming? Because you have built your career kind of like in an early version of this. Like, you have multiple newsletters. You're very savvy in this way. So first of all, it concerns me that even you are concerned. Yeah. But then I'm curious about, like, did you see this coming down the pike, or like, how was it born out of necessity? Like, what was that for you?
I mean, I was always innately interested in social media. And to be clear, this is before it became the toxic hellscape that I consider it today. Although I'm still active, it's at a much reduced level. You know, I've always been interested in technology, in how technology intersects with creativity. And it was really obvious, I think, to most people that social media and other online tools were going to give people the ability to reach their readers directly without requiring retailers and distributors and publishers and all of that. If you could reach people directly, that was investing in your career. And part of my traditional publishing experience taught me that too, because unlike most commercial publishers at the time, we had a really strong direct-to-consumer business. We had book clubs, we had magazines, which are a kind of direct-to-consumer business if you also have a book publisher on the side. We had newsletters, we had online education. So meaning we had like millions and millions of email addresses. So I saw the power of that before social media came into the picture. I think it was easy to spot for anyone who saw the early blogs, early Facebook, early Twitter, and my career took off because of the activity on social media, specifically Twitter. So like, I totally get it that new authors, they're essentially, every new generation or every year you have this new crop of authors who are finding their way through whatever the popular platforms are. And right now it happens to be TikTok. And I think when I initially saw TikTok really taking off, and this was like during the pandemic, I would say, so like around 2020, I did start to wonder, well, how much is this a permanent shift and feature of our lives now? Like, are we becoming a video first culture? And I still don't know the answer to that. But I think what reassures me from the past is that so many things are cyclical, and there's still an audience, I think, of people who love writing and generally will put the writing first and aren't as interested in video. This is not a knock against people using video at all. I'm just saying that I certainly didn't get into the industry thinking that I would spend so much time talking about TikTok and YouTube.
I would love to drill down into some of the more interesting kind of case studies or like exciting case studies that you've seen of where you're like, whoa, this is like a pioneering way to look at this, way to promote this, way to distribute this? Does anything come to mind?
Well, today I had a conversation with an author for an article I'm working on. He started writing and publishing in 2019, writing things like lit, RPG, fantasy, I think medieval fantasy. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to him was because starting in 2022, he got on TikTok kind of as part of one of those challenges, not dissimilar to like NaNoWriMo, where you're with an accountability partner and you decide, okay, we have to figure out some way to market and promote or get this project done. Let's do this challenge together. So he started on TikTok, not interested, but in the spirit of partnership. And he saw, oh my God, this is selling my books. Like within the first 5 days, he was like, I've never sold so many books before I got on TikTok. What happened next was he just doubled down on it. It's not that he's exclusive to TikTok. He also uses YouTube and Instagram, and he has a Discord community. So it started to expand outward from his TikTok use. But as of today, every Friday, he does a TikTok live where he sells like a couple $1,000s worth of books.
Holy shit.
And he is not unusual. Like he is but the tip of the iceberg. So I don't know if I made this clear, but he's self-publishing. There's no publisher involved. And he's got, he's doing things better than a traditional publisher would in my estimation. So that's what I mean by the way, the new ways that authors are getting known. It's almost like, it reminded me talking to him a little bit of like the Home Shopping Network. Like people just really enjoy seeing him live and they want to order it right there from his shop on TikTok because they see him.
I love that. Okay, so I would love your thoughts on this. So like some of the people that I've seen do this stuff, and this is no knock on anyone, but you're not like, oh, shiny star, you know what I mean? It's like some of it is just the showing up of it. Do you feel like that's a big part of it? Or are you like, no, these are stars, obviously. I'm not even talking about this man specifically, just I mean in general.
No, this particular author I spoke to today, he's not a name that I think most people have heard of unless you're like deep into the self-publishing community. Maybe you would have heard of him. And he's able to succeed because of consistency. He, like you said, he shows up consistently. And that's what the principles are not different than what I followed when I was on Twitter or when I started my newsletters or when I started blogging. It was putting in the effort every day. It's the small incremental steps and progress that you make. So it's not that I think he got in at a particular moment that was really fortunate for him, I think. Could someone start in exactly the same way today and have the same success? Possibly. But he's also, it's really hard to, he's had 3 years to understand the system he's playing in, right? So I think it's, even if you watch what he does and you try to mimic what he does, there's always going to be a learning curve in figuring out if the readers that you want to reach are in that same environment and what's going to really resonate with them.
Totally. I just interviewed someone, Rick Pallas, who did this thing on Twitter where he would reply to like viral tweets and he would sell a bunch of books by being like a reply guy on the viral tweets. He'd comment on whatever the thing was and then he'd be like, and if you're interested in the Palmer Hotel, like you can Venmo me here or whatever. And what was so interesting to me about that is just like, that was really pioneering. And also Twitter has changed so much that that's not even possible anymore. So it's like, yes, we have all these advancements, but they change so much even over a few years that like you constantly have to be learning a new tactic.
Yeah. Yeah. The algorithms, as they say, are always shifting and changing how things get discovered. So it's, like I said, going back to the creator economy, issue. That's part of the skill set now, is instead of getting angry at the algorithms and these companies for changing the rules, you have to figure out a way to roll with it if you want to use those platforms to gain visibility. So I should say some people opt out of this game or just decide not to even play. And that's totally valid, but you have to figure out your thing. Like, everyone figures out the thing that they can repeat consistently over time. And I'm just hoping that for me, I can keep doing that with, my newsletter or, things at my website, and it will be enough.
Okay. I want to talk about, we'll get into newsletters. I definitely want to go heavy into newsletters, but I also want to talk about like the Taylor Swift of it all. I feel like she's just emblematic of these conversations and maybe has like made them a little bit more mainstream, but things like wanting to own your whole catalog, which you do as a self-published author, and you have more leverage than going into negotiations if you are successfully self-published. But I think that's like a more important value to a lot of writers these days than before. You wanted a traditionally published book. And so obviously they would just own the rights unless you were really smart about somehow getting them to revert to you. And then another piece. So it's the ownership piece I want to talk about. And then also, I was just listening to this episode of Today Explained, and, they were talking about her release, and the way that you chart Today is by selling all these different variations of the same album. And that's how you game the system to essentially be at the top of the charts. And she did it like, a $500 million better than before, or, like she did it like way better than she even did on the last album. But they were saying how the system has changed. It used to involve live tickets was part of the equation and all of that. I'd love to also dive into the gamification of the lists and anything that you have to say about that.
Well, it really depends on which list you're talking about. So in the traditional publishing side, we have Circana BookScan, which tracks book sales in a variety of ways. When people talk about BookScan figures, they're usually talking about the classic print retail sales, which plays a pretty significant role in what you see on bestseller lists. And here I'm thinking of like the USA Today list and to some extent the New York Times. I say to some extent for the New York Times because their list has curation added to it. They care about a particular type of book, and they are calling up specific independent bookstores to see what is selling at those independent bookstores. Now, who shops at independent bookstores? I probably don't have to tell anyone that it tends to be a very certain type of person leaning a certain type of way, which emphasizes a certain type of book. So when traditional publishers and traditional authors want to get on that list, they tend to focus a lot on moving copies through particular bookstores, print copies. Even though Circana does track other formats, that doesn't really play into those lists. And you'll see that the New York Times even separates out the formats. The USA Today tried to make it more of all-in-one, where they put all of the formats into a single bucket and then give you the bestseller lists regardless of format. And some people think that's a more fair way to go about it. But it also has its shortcomings, because one of the things that I don't think is well understood by the public or even by authors is that all of the self-publishing sales that are out there in the universe, and by some estimates, it's maybe a third, maybe more of overall book sales in the United States, at least. All of those sales that are happening, especially if it's like a subscription read through Kindle Unlimited, it's not getting captured by our traditional measurements. Especially if the book is Amazon only, if it doesn't have an ISBN, all of that is like the dark matter of the publishing universe. So compared to the music industry, I just think book publishing figures, sales figures, are just a total mess. And it's really hard to know, in fact, how a particular book performed. just seeing it on the New York Times list actually doesn't tell you a lot. It tells you that it performed well in bricks and mortar stores, and that's kind of it. So this is another reason, and then I'll stop, that Amazon launched its own bestseller lists because they wanted to have something that reflected activity surrounding a book that wasn't just about a sale. They wanted to include audiobook listens in Audible, and they wanted to include people reading in Kindle Unlimited. So you can also look at Amazon's lists for a different perspective on what's doing well.
Yeah, I was talking to a self-published author, and we were talking about, I think USA Today allows self-published authors to make the list. New York Times, I think, has a rule explicitly against it. I think I was reading that.
Well, that's the fascinating thing. They don't have a rule, but they have set up the system so that it's virtually impossible for a self-published book to get on the list.
Okay, gotcha. And then, but how do you, because, something on sale for 99 cents on Amazon versus something that people are, buying or in whatever format, the physical format for like much more money.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that? Or you just feel like, what would be your perfect kind of algorithm?
Well, I mean, the New York Times is definitely prioritizing the people buying the hardcovers and the more expensive stuff and deprioritizing the 99-cent sort of literature. I think the USA Today is where I lean toward because I don't know that it makes sense to build a bestseller list that's just about a single format of a book. Because it's really penalizing certain genres and categories. And why would you do that? Because there's some genres of fiction where more than 50% of the sales are in audio. So to me, it's USA Today is a better reflection, although now I can't remember. I used to know. I can't remember how they account for audio sales in their figures. And then the other issue that's starting to become bigger is the fact that so many people are direct selling now. And obviously those aren't captured by any retailer or anyone that's measuring. And so I find that over time, maybe I've always felt like the industry focuses too much on bestsellers and what's on these lists. And I think it's more of a marker of status and prestige. It becomes a marketing or promotion tool rather than it actually saying anything meaningful about how a book performed.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts on ownership? Is this the trend that you see and any implications?
Certainly for self-publishing authors who are making lots of money, especially like on their ebooks or on audiobooks, they are kind of loath to hand that over to a publisher because what value does a publisher add in selling an ebook or an audiobook if it's already done? Like there doesn't need to be any further editorial or production work. What you've been noticing, what you alluded to is how they're making these deals with traditional houses where Bloom Books is the big one, which is under Source Books. They partner with self-publishing authors and help them do better with print, in particular, with print retail distribution and getting those books into stores and helping them accomplish whatever it is they want, whether that's hitting a bestseller list because they want that accolade or they want international presence, they want more translation deals, etc. So in those sorts of situations, things have trended much more in favor of the author being able to control and own their rights rather than having to sell the farm just to get their print books into a store. However, there's still plenty of authors signing terrible contracts, whether it's because they don't know better, they're very young. I find that if authors have success very early, especially in non-traditional ways, like through Wattpad or Royal Road or one of these serialization apps, sometimes companies will come and make them an offer and it's not a good offer, but the author's thinking, oh gosh, that's a lot of money. Or like, I can't wait to like offload some of this burden onto someone else. And they're not thinking long term. So I find it really depends on the person, how much they're, protecting their interests.
Totally. Using myself as a case study. So I've been working on what will be my debut memoir for a long time. But if you would have asked me like 5 years ago when I, had finished a full draft and was thinking about where I wanted it to land, I would be like, I'm going to do anything for it to go to a big 5. And it wound up going to a small press that I really love. And I am old. I'm not one of these young authors. So I had enough savvy, and I worked in LA in entertainment. And so I just had enough savvy to like be able to negotiate a good contract. But I did want more control than I would have had probably at a big five. So anyway, that's my case study. And then I have this working theory that I would love your thoughts on. But I held on to a lot of rights, including my audiobook rights. I am obviously a podcaster. I know how to produce audio. So I was like, I think holding your audio rights, if you're a person that knows how to produce audio, could be maybe the best way to make money off your book. Your thoughts?
Oh, it's complicated.
Okay.
It's complicated because of the distribution question and the deals that publishers are able to strike with really powerful outlets like Audible and Spotify. So for example, if you're a traditionally published author and let's say it's Penguin Random House, and I think they probably do most or all of their audiobooks in-house. And they probably have a fantastic deal with both Audible and with Spotify that basically means no matter how that audiobook is consumed, whether it's with one of those credits or if it's just, in an all-you-can-listen environment, that they are getting like the full value of that book regardless. Because they have power. They're in a better position to dictate these terms. And so you, the author, are going to make the same royalty. You're going to make a royalty amount on a higher net payment coming through to the publisher. What I find with smaller publishers or with self-publishing authors is there's no negotiation. Like it's a take it or leave it situation. So Audible is a notorious black box in trying to figure out what are you going to get for this audiobook. Like you can't even set your own price. With Spotify, you're definitely not getting the equivalent of a sale. If you're self-distributing there, you're going to get paid based on how many minutes were listened to. It's a pooling model. You can use a distributor like Findaway, or now they're called Invoices. They recently had a brand change. And so anyway, I shouldn't get into the weeds. All that to say, if you're an independent author working with these ginormous platforms, you can certainly earn good money off your audio, but you're not getting the best deal, and not an equivalent deal as some of these bigger houses. Because the maths surrounding audiobook payments is so complicated, I've never been able to do kind of like a comparison between a self-published author's earnings and a traditionally published author's earnings. So I can't say for sure, but there are so many complaints from authors about Audible in particular, and how it pays out on audio, that I think if authors were able to sell their audio direct to reader, that would change the equation. But that's not an area where I'm seeing a lot of activity so far.
Okay, so my theory might not pan out. Because basically what I'm hearing is, in that case, you got to do a lot of volume, like, for it to really pay off like it should.
Either volume, or you're using it as lead generation to sell the other formats. So something else I see occurring with self-published authors, if they hold the audiobook rights, I've seen them put up the entire audiobook on YouTube. Like these are 7 to 8 hour videos. And this does two things. One, there are people who will never pay for an audiobook, but they will listen to that whole thing on YouTube, and that will generate you ad revenue, assuming you have ads turned on. And so they get a little bit of money that way. But then they find that it does generate sales in other formats, because not every people might want to go back to it in print, or if they recommend it to a friend, the friend will buy it in a different format. So that is if you're able to use that as part of a larger strategy to market and promote, then absolutely, it would make sense to retain those rights. But I certainly, like the really commercial authors in the genres where like more than 50% of the sales are in audio, that's probably not going to be their first move.
Okay, very interesting. I find myself buying both usually. Like if I buy the audiobook, usually I like sometimes I read along with the audiobook. Like I just kind of like to have both or go back and forth.
The authors claim up and down, the ones I've spoken to about this strategy, that it doesn't cannibalize sales. But, you're not going to see any traditional publisher using that as a strategy.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the AI conversation. There are, and fair enough. I get why writers don't like it, but sometimes it's like they seem like they would kill a person for using AI. I'm serious. Like that's the vibe.
Yeah.
And so there's that. I feel like it's kind of coming anyway. I podcast. Do I want it to touch my book? No. But do I find it helpful to do some things related to like my podcast transcripts and optimizing titles and things like that? Yes. When I look at the industry, I could see, like ghostwriters interviewing someone and using those transcripts to get a draft that they then have to heavily edit. Like I could see it kind of seeping into the industry that way. I'm not really worried about like a whole robot, like writing a bestseller. Like I feel like we really want human stories, but so there's a lot to unpack there, but I would love your take on AI right now.
I'll start by just acknowledging the anger, resentment, bitterness, outrage that people feel over what the companies who have created these tools, so like OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera. I just want to acknowledge these companies did some really illegal things, which is basically pirating entire libraries of books in order to train their models without consent or permission. And of course, there are lawsuits ongoing surrounding all of this. So I just want to acknowledge that. I acknowledge, the harms, but I also want to be very pragmatic here and also realistic about where this is going to go, because AI is not going to be declared illegal and it's not going back in the box. And it doesn't really matter what problem you have with it, whether it's the environment, plagiarism, theft, copyright. It's going to put humans out of work. Whatever objections you have, if you decide to absolutely not use it, I think you're going to just be hurting yourself. And by that, I don't mean writing your material. I don't even think the most cynical person believes that we're only going to read AI-generated work in the future. I don't think anybody is predicting that. At least I'm not. But if you don't use AI, you're increasing the amount of time you're spending probably on marketing and promotion tasks, administrative tasks, research tasks. It's also a really good light coach, brainstorming partner, someone I'm already, referring it to as a person, that thing that can help you avoid the blank page or get out of some sort of block that you're facing with your project. So this is not a mandate. Everyone needs to go and use it now. But I think if you're refusing to use it on principle, I think eventually everyone else is going to lose their inhibitions and they're going to start using it. And then you're going to be at a disadvantage. I'm already seeing in self-publishing the authors who focus on putting out, say, 3 books, 6 books a year. They're using it to help increase the speed of their writing and publishing process so that they can be more competitive. And I think I have great concern for self-publishing authors who are swearing it off, because I know what the authors they're up against are going to be doing. For traditionally published authors, it's a little bit different. I think it more relates to how can you use these tools to benefit whatever your goals are. I use it extensively to help me research and report, but you have to know how to use it intelligently with critical thinking skills. It's not, as of today, and obviously this is changing week to week, but as of today, you really have to come to it with some skill if you want decent results, and you also have to pay for it. If you're using the free models, in my mind, you're just wasting your time. It's really meant that it's free because it's really a free trial. They're trying to get you to pay, and they're not going to give you the best capabilities when you're on those free plans. So for anyone who says, oh, well, it hallucinates and it gets these things wrong and et cetera, all of the criticisms, I would say, well, you haven't learned how to use it properly, because once you once you go through that learning curve and better understand what it's capable of, I think you will absolutely find some ways that it can save you some time.
Last topic, and then we'll do just a quick lightning round on the newsletter front. I guess just to go back to my own experience, because I have the podcast, because I have built a couple Substacks, like I feel like for me now, when I'm looking at a publishing situation, I'm not necessarily, before I was like big five or bust. Now when I'm thinking, and I hope I stay with my small press for a long time. I feel like that's like a nice kind of best of both worlds. But self-publishing looks like strangely attractive compared to what I used to think about it. It's like all the control, all the ownership, and if you are already like investing in your platform, like it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. So I would love you to talk about just opportunities and if you see any challenges with newsletters and how that's been so important for you to leverage, it seems like, in your career.
I started with newsletters technically in 2009, but I didn't really commit to a strict sending schedule until roughly 2014, 2015, when I went full-time freelance. And I knew the importance of getting regular with it. And my strategy has become more complicated over time. So I now have about 5 newsletters that I'm sending, which I do not necessarily recommend for anyone. But, the needs of your business will dictate really how many you have and how long they last. Because I do love the newsletter as a vehicle for both marketing and content delivery, because it can do both. It's what I focused on for launching the second edition. I did a limited series newsletter. So I do think having the email address is one of the best assets for any author for ensuring a sustainable career. And the email address of people who really want whatever you're doing next. And so the newsletter is just an act of reinforcing that relationship and the trust so that when there is something that's really important to you, some project that's coming out, that you can get people to act and start spreading the word on your behalf. That, for me, that's where all of my marketing and promotion starts. It's with the newsletter. And I don't think it's going to lose effectiveness over time. I think what makes the conversation a little more complicated since Substack entered the picture is that Substack really wants you to charge for your email newsletter. And I don't think that's where the primary value lies. I think it's in being able to reach the people who care most about your work. Later on, if you're in master mode, that's what I would call it. Maybe you can find a way to charge for it, as I have, but I think that only comes after you've mastered the free newsletter.
So would you say for writers, minimum viable, platform with newsletters is sending it out seasonally or just squatting there and having it accrue email addresses? It's sort of a must at this point, right?
I think it's a must, especially if you want to engage in direct sales like self-publishing authors do. And there's so many factors here, but I would say you're not probably getting the most out of the practice. You're not getting the benefit if you're not sending at least once every 1 to 2 months. And this is for just a general author newsletter to support your career. I'm not talking about Substack necessarily, just something that helps you stay in touch with people who have already demonstrated interest in what you do.
Yeah, totally. Okay, what is next for you?
I am going to be speaking at the Red Pencil Conference in the Seattle area. They invited me to come speak because the editors everywhere are feeling kind of anxious about AI putting them out of work.
Oh.
And, spoiler alert, there will still be editors after the AI revolution. So I'm going to have a generally optimistic talk and reassurance.
Awesome. Any bucket list writing goals?
It's always get the next newsletter done. It's never any bigger than that.
I love that. One piece of writing advice you wish you could give your former self.
Break everything up into tiny, tiny, tiny steps. Otherwise, you'll procrastinate.
That is such a good one. Yes. One tip for writers trying to get a book published.
Know who you're writing for. Whatever that means to you, know who you're writing for.
And your all-time favorite piece of your own writing.
The last newsletter I sent.
Okay, tell listeners where they can connect with you online, find your mini newsletters.
JaneFriedman.com is where you can find all the stuff that I write and publish and do online.
It's so valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Bleeders. This one is a video episode, so you can listen to it on the podcast feed or you can watch it on YouTube. Just search The Bleeders Podcast. If you want to support the show and level up your own creative practice, check out my upcoming classes and workshops for writers and podcasters. I love helping writers uplevel their craft and their career. And of course, my debut memoir, Girl Gone Wild, drops April 1st. Please pre-order your copy. It really helps. Rate, review, like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, happy bleeding.